Welcome to the Patterson Foundation's Nonprofit Thrivability Podcast. The Patterson Foundation's Nonprofit Thrivability Initiative shares opportunities for organizations to strengthen their mission impact by embracing a thrivable operating model. This week, we are speaking about Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. It is an opportunity for nonprofits in our region to learn and implement research-backed fundraising principles and techniques. Organizations that participate in Fueling Dynamic Fundraising strengthen their fundraising capability through a multi-day, in-person course designed and presented in partnership with the Fundraising School at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. This week, we are speaking with Tom Melville, Executive Director of the Literacy Council of Sarasota, and his board chair, Laura Randall. This is a super interesting interview because Laura is a fundraising professional for her full-time job, and Tom was previously a director of development in a past life. So to hear the perspective of two people who have been in it and done it for a full-time job before, to be able to participate in this session and still hear all the value that they received from it is absolutely outstanding. But you don't have to hear me talk about it. You can hear it directly from them here in a second. But to learn more about Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, please scan this QR code. And without further ado, please welcome Tom and Laura. Well, Tom and Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. If you would, please just start us off with telling us about your organization and your role there. And Tom, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, great. Well, first, thank you, Reed. It's the Literacy Council of Sarasota. So with a name and an organization and a mission like that, we were happy to be interviewed by someone named Reed. So we're a nonprofit organization here in Sarasota County, 501c3, and our mission is to improve adult literacy in the county for adults, not necessarily children, but for adults 16 and older, through one-on-one, sort of needs-based, learner-focused, one-on-one tutoring and small group instruction. Our vision is that everybody in the community, all adults, have the English communication and literacy skills that they need to get ahead in life and thrive. And currently, we serve about 300 adults each week. We have about 100 with the one-on-one tutoring, and that's where we have volunteer tutors that we train and support throughout the year. And then we have another 200 that we serve, especially since the pandemic, with online and in-person small group instruction. So that sort of keeps us busy.
Yeah, I bet. And Laura, what is your role?
So I am honored to serve as the chair of the board, the president of the board. This is my second year. We've just begun the second year of my term. I've been a board member for about 5 years, and I have a background in fundraising. So this is a really exciting opportunity for me to see from not from the top down, but from the middle of it, how fundraising works from a board perspective. And I'm excited to get our board more deeply involved in helping to support the organization.
Absolutely. I'm interested to hear how you are going to be doing that. But let's start a little bit more broad here. We're here to talk about Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. And Laura, I am interested to hear your perspective on this. How would you describe Fueling Dynamic Fundraising to an organization who's interested in the program or who has never even heard of Fueling Dynamic Fundraising? And Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Terrific. So, Reed, I am a CFRE. I have been in the fundraising milieu for 15 years and have worked for a number of different organizations, both large and small. So I was interested to see what Fueling Dynamic Fundraising would teach me, and it taught me a lot. Sort of spoiler alert. It was a great opportunity to get a fresh perspective. We learned a lot about current best practices. People think fundraising is just asking for money, but there's a lot of tools that you need on an ongoing basis. So I really appreciated the opportunity to learn from people at the Indiana School of Philanthropy.
Yeah, the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy.
Lilly Family School of Philanthropy.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are really the best. They are best in class. And so to be able to hear from some of their instructors was brilliant. Just as important, however, was the opportunity to learn with my cohorts. So people who are brand new to fundraising. There were some board members who are new to fundraising and some executive directors or directors of development who are relatively new, and then others who are a bit as long as the tooth as me. So I think that cohort was really important, and I'm excited about sort of the follow-up activities we're going to be able to do with our colleagues as well.
Interesting. And Tom, could you maybe dive a little bit into the details? What all did this program entail? I heard you guys were in a cohort, so you worked with others. How long was it? How long were the days? If you could just dive into some of those details.
So it was 4 days. They were long but very productive days, right? And very insightful days. So, it started from, it was like 8 to 5, basically, right? 8 to 5, 8 to 4. But at least they fed us, right? It was wonderful at, the Carlisle Inn. And I think just like, picking up on what you said, Laura, it was wonderful being in the room with other colleagues with some of the same issues and same focuses as you, dealing with not just, it's fundraising development, but also I think it gave us a shot in the arm about philanthropy overall. And so I've been in the nonprofit world, I'm going to date myself here, for 30 years. I started out as a teenager. And I've always had, as an executive director, I've been in one role or another. I had one brief stint as a development director at the Monterey County Community Foundation back in the day. And so I thought, is this going to be something worth our while? I'm familiar with planned giving from my work at the Community Foundation. I write grants, we do events, we steward donors. But this was really quite a bit different. This was the deep dive. This was with one of the premier research organizations, universities in the country on this topic. And I was just very impressed by how thorough it was and sort of the academic rigor behind all the evidence-based practices and just sort of, hands-on experiences. And you learn from one another. Rarely do you have an opportunity that you may be in the same room for a function, like with your peers, but oftentimes you're not in the same room sort of talking about the same things, breaking into small groups, practicing together, developing, closer relationships with, again, people in the field.
So it's really interesting that both of you have professional fundraising experience. Tom as a previous director of development, Laura is a CFRE. So I'm curious to know which particular topics you specifically, each of you found valuable. And I'm going to start with Laura. Was there any topics or sessions that you found especially valuable?
All of them. Particularly valuable, though, I think was some of the organizational deep dive, sort of the governance opportunities. Again, I practiced the fundraising and the creating a fundraising plan. I sort of lived that out every single day. But looking at it, again, from a board chair perspective and how we sort of measure the success of our fundraising. I know from my day job, my perspective is that I'm doing tasks, I'm hitting my KPI, so I'm being successful. But from a board perspective, all you see is sort of the outcome. So why are we hitting this number? Why are we not? So it was great for Tom and me to sit next to each other, hear the same thing. And now, in fact, we're working on a strategic plan that allows us to create KPIs so that Tom can measure, we can talk through what it is we want to measure, and then I can sort of do the interpretive dance for the board to tell them we may not be fully funded, but it's only 2 months into the fiscal year. So I think it was a lot of that organizational development, which they talked in greater detail than I expected, which was terrific. Again, it was just sort of learning, building the case for support is something that I'm both doing professionally and as a volunteer. And so learning sort of best practices about that. I think that if you don't know who you are and you cannot clearly articulate what your mission is, ain't no way you're going to make money, right? So I think walking through how to create that case, we spent a lot of time on it. And I think every part of that lesson was really important.
And Tom, what sessions or topics did you find the most valuable?
Well, just to pick up on, as Laura and I continue to talk about, fueling dynamic fundraising and where we are right now, it really has developed, evolved our organization into thinking more about that culture of philanthropy, throughout the organization, top down and then also bottom up. And even though we've always had, a case for support, that's sort of a standard thing, for organizations, fundraising. But what we saw is like, well, maybe it isn't as fully developed with current best practices. And, we need to really revisit this and include more people. We're just like any other nonprofit that, continues to grow. Where we are now from a year ago, it's amazing. We've been able to build more capacity. And I think when you're smaller and you're wearing many different hats, things can get sort of, the old term siloed, right? Like, okay, here's fundraising and that's your piece. And as long as you're doing it well, getting results, thumbs up. Here's programmatic pieces. And these are the folks that have all the stories about the good impacts. And of course you hear about it, but are they really integrated with one another, right? Sort of the way you do business. And so the sessions, and of course you pointed out in some of your prep with us, is you sort of spot on. It was donor stewardship. It was, case for support. And of course, re-looking and reevaluating how we approach our annual fund, campaign. And again, sort of getting everyone, we work together. We have a board that's always given, 100% of our board always gives financially. We have good relationship with our donors, but this is really about taking it up to that next level. I think as we got into, and we're probably not the only ones, as we got into these workshops, you sort of realize, oh, I'm more on a plateau than I realized, right? And it's time to take it up to that next level. And so I think the case support was very important, but also to, the donor stewardship, and even had some successes with some of these things, already since those workshops.
So, go ahead, Laura.
If I can throw in one more point, one very actionable item that I took home, and I've used both, again, professionally, and Tom and I used in a meeting, is just the ask. I said earlier, people think it's just asking for money. It's not just asking for money. It's sort of the freeway you need to take to get to your exit, which is the ask. And then you get back on and you start it again. But they gave us opportunities to role play with other people who I had never met before, which was brilliant. So that opportunity first to explain it and then give us a real life opportunity. And because people had been in the same room as us, they sort of knew the objection. So that was probably the hardest ask I've ever made. And I ended up getting more than I asked for. So I wish that came true more often. But I do think that like some of those really nitty gritty, like here's how you do it. And again, the folks from the Lilly School of Philanthropy were brilliant about answering questions. Truly, there were dumb questions, but they answered them anyway.
I mean, you guys have mentioned a couple things, culture of philanthropy, KPIs, case for support, developing that, and then all of that impacting a strategic planning process. So what have you implemented? What was first to be implemented after that training? And then what's something that you've kind of put on the back burner that's maybe a more long-term that you learned from this session?
Well, because I had one. I mean, within 2 weeks. I mean, it was literally like the week after, the workshops concluded. So, of course, one of the considerations was like, oh, great, 4 full days in the month of June, the last month of the fiscal year. Let's just squeeze that in. But it got me thinking, because this is the time of year that we sort of approach some of our, major donors, our major supporters. And with some of this, this new information, a new perspective from the workshops, from this Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, I've always go and I always ask, these donors, but I actually, with all the information from the workshops, developed sort of a one-pager, kept it simple, and instead of making it sound like, testing the level of charity and generosity, because it's always been there. They're long-time supporters. I really took a different approach. And again, this is the instructors, my peers from the workshops, sort of in my head at the time is, well, instead of looking at it that way, looking at it as more an investment. And with maybe, with this much more dollars, this is what more we can do. And so I took them to lunch a week after the workshops. And, $100,000 gift annually turned into a $150,000 gift, for this coming year. And so, that probably would not have happened in that way and to that level of success without attending these workshops.
So we want to send Tom to every workshop we can.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. Immediate results.
Right. And I think a little bit longer term, again, we're doing strategic planning and incorporating this now is very timely. not only are we incorporating more of a culture of philanthropy in our strategic planning, but we also decided, at this point, again, it was very timely. We were in the process about sort of refreshing our brand, and we decided, no, we're going to rebrand completely. And so we're now in that process of rebranding the whole organization, the messaging. And again, it's invest with the Literacy Council because these are the profound and lasting impacts that it has on people's lives and in the community.
Wow. I mean, a rebrand is no small feat. Laura, is there anything that you took away from the sessions that you implemented right away with the board or intentionally saved for later?
Well, we have doubled down. We had started a strategic planning effort about a year ago, and we really, I became convicted that we needed to do that. So we have a handful of core board members who have given up several Saturdays to make that happen because we realized, and again, I think it's organizational development as much as fundraising that came from this. It was knowing that we all needed to be clearly aligned on our mission, on our storytelling, and on what success looks like. And so we've really doubled down on that. I think, as Tom mentioned, the storytelling, so the case for support and providing board members with the tools that they need to be part of the fundraising culture. We can't talk about a culture of fundraising unless we're able to live it out. And so we're making sure that people have buy-in. We can't ask them to do something that they don't agree with. So make sure they have buy-in. We make sure that they have the tools that they need. And I had sort of a short-term whim as well that we were proud of. And I think it came a week or so after we were in a committee meeting, and we have a particular board member who's been generous, annually generous for some time. And so I knew that, the signs of someone's readiness to make a planned gift is, continuous giving over year, a consistent amount. With all due respect to that board member, it's age. I also knew that she did not have heirs, and I knew that she had sort of discussed what she would do to support us in increasing our giving. And so with that information, I boldly and unexpectedly to Tom, suggested that we meet with her to talk about a planned gift. And she was very receptive. And again, I think the reason I got my CFRE, Reed and Tom, is that I wanted to have that knowledge, but I also wanted to have the confidence that I had that knowledge. And so I think in large part, Fueling Dynamic Fundraising reinvigorated me to have that confidence to really practice the profession of philanthropy, of fundraising. It's not just, it's not just asking for money, but it's a process to do that. So all that to say, Fueling Dynamic Fundraising gave me the opportunity and the encouragement to ask for that gift. We still have to finish that meeting, but I'm confident that we're going to get that gift.
Wow. That is great to hear that a program like this can help even somebody who's been doing this for 15 years and is
Absolutely.
certified in this space. And to hear the passion that your board members have to give up Saturdays and to make planned gifts is extremely impressive. And that's what you need from the board, right? You need that passion.
Well, just with this, right, because it was a commitment. And before I was going to ask Laura as our board president to commit to this, right, thinking it was good. It was June. It was 4 full days. It's sort of a crazy time. We're small staff, that sort of thing. But what sort of tipped it for me is in the advertising for this, I guess we're cycle 4, right? They had pictures. So you get the advertising, you give them the mail. And then looking at a picture, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's our former office manager. Right? She's like in the workshop, she's staring and she's animated. I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, she looks like she's having a good time. So I called her. I said, is this just a basic fundraising course that you would get and, that maybe, AFP might put on, something like that? She said, oh no. She goes, this is a game changer. This is something that, do your best. She gave me some pointers, about the application and she was absolutely right. And we're right there in the chorus with her now, that this is something, like you said, Laura, even if someone, or like you said, just Reed, even if you've had experience, you're an experienced fundraiser, you are going to learn something out of this course and be even more inspired. I think that was the big thing for all of us, but for Laura and I in particular, we're really inspired. You do this as part of your job. You like doing it. You enjoy it. And of course, who wasn't inspired by a major gift? But, to get into the room with your peers and be inspired and really start rethinking about your organization. My former office manager, she was correct. This is a game changer for us.
What a recommendation for Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. Sorry, Laura.
No, I was going to say, I wish I could get day job. I wish I could get my executive director and my board chair to attend something like this. We're a national organization, so we're not, we are not active in the Sarasota area, but I have shared my book. I've shared the Bible with them, so hopefully they'll convert.
I want to talk a little bit about that. You just mentioned board chair and executive director attending this. Was there a lot of pairs like that attended this organization, this session, or was it mostly executive directors, mostly fundraisers from the organization? Who else was in the room specifically? I
think it was, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was mostly either executive directors and development directors alone. There were two organizations, if I remember correctly, that were all volunteer. So that was the board chair and the ED and probably the program person as well. But I do believe we may have been the only ED board chair pair, Tom.
Yeah, I think we're
the best looking.
That's right. Our outfits were matching every day. We have our standards. So, I think it was mostly executive directors and development staff. And then, like I said, a couple of all volunteer organizations. And then there were a couple, I think a handful that did have board members. Some relevant board members attend with them.
And I know, again, as Tom mentioned, it is 4 days, it was 32 hours out of a 70-hour week. But I think having redundancy in organizations was really good for us. Again, it was an exceptional opportunity. But I would encourage, if organizations really want to get as much as they can out of it, have two people in the room, whether it's the ED and the development director. If it's a small organization, if it's, a board member, the development chair or the board chair. So often board chairs in Sarasota are post-career, so they may be able to do it. But even if it's just so two people hear the same thing, I think it's really, Tom and I have referred to, do you remember the day before the donuts we talked about? Every day was before the donuts.
So switching gears a little bit here, actually still talking about your cohort and working with others, TPF has values that they call the 5 C's. They are caring, connecting, collaborating, contributing, and creating. And I want to talk about connecting and collaborating. You guys were in a room of, I think, 60 plus people with 40 plus organizations. How did you find that group dynamic and peer collaboration helpful? And then what did you learn from the others in the room? And Laura, I'll start with you.
So what I learned again is that fundraisers are best when they collaborate. None of the 4 C's are compete. And I think it was interesting to hear, and I am a strong believer in this, and to hear my colleagues in the room reiterate the fact that we need to work from a place of abundance, not from a place of scarcity. There is plenty of money in Sarasota. And if you connect the right person with the right passion to the right purpose, you're going to get a gift. So I really believe that I applaud the Patterson Foundation and some of the other foundations in our area as well for encouraging collaboration and communication. And I saw every single person with whom I spoke willing to share sort of actually very discreetly, which was really impressive. I don't know that I heard a single donor name. And there are, there are some outstanding donors in the community, and no one mentioned them, which I really appreciated. So discretion was paramount. But I do think we all sort of talked about how do you approach a person in this situation, or how do you approach this? And again, with extreme discretion, which was really important to me because I believe in the ethics of fundraising. We had a lot of conversation about collaboration, and I've even, had conversations with some of the people that I met there, following up, just exchanging ideas and knowing that I have sort of a larger circle of people with whom I can discuss, like, hey, I have this donor and, they live in Mars, and how do how have you done interstellar communication before? Which would be fun, wouldn't it? But
yeah, one day. Tom, before we go to you, I want to re-emphasize two things that Laura just mentioned. None of the C's are compete. That is, preach that from on high. There's enough money to go around in this community, and organizations need to work together. That's how you increase your impact. And then a TPFism, you mentioned abundance over scarcity, have that abundance mindset. So many organizations think about what they don't have, but if we can focus on what we do have, what can we achieve? Tom, turning it over to you now. What did you find valuable about that group dynamic, that collaboration with others?
Well, just everything that's just been said, right? And Laura, thank you for that, because I think that sort of set the tone really for the whole group. And do a shout out to Sarah Leonard, the consultant with the Patterson Foundation. She's the team lead, and she sort of helped set the tone with humor and got us all sort of, smiling and joking, early in the morning. And then at key points, she sort of kept us all focused. And I think it sort of goes back to like an old adage from, fundraising, a rising tide floats all boats, right? And so it wasn't about anyone bragging or competing or telling a story or whatever. Everybody was knew why you were there, right? It really, the tone was set in us to learn and grow with one another because we're stronger together, right? Collaboratively. And I know, and then another aspect of it that I thought was great, I mean, there was the formal academic instruction, it was structured and whatnot, but they also we all have our burning questions, right? We always have that little thing, right? And for me, I was waiting for that one, right? Because, it's on the agenda. It's like, what's your burning questions? Like, I got one. And one was we were thinking maybe doing a new CRM, customer relations management software. Well, they're all out there, right? And if you're talking to a salesperson, theirs is the best and worth the investment and whatnot. But I was like, no, here's a bunch of folks, and everyone had sort of a different CRM, a different way of managing it. And so they paused, and that was sort of the exercise. It was wonderful. I mean, you've heard about, these different, databases to manage donors and your fundraising efforts. But, is it worth the cost? And so they were up there putting dollar signs. If it's like $4 signs, then it better have a 9 or 10 as far as performance and effectiveness. But a lot of them didn't. And so then it whittled it down. So I think, just having opportunities like that to learn from one another, from what you're really dealing with, day to day as a fundraising development professional.
That is great that they cover, not just the topics on the agenda, the more lecture style stuff and the group stuff, but they do answer those burning questions, because I know that maybe you asked that question, but other people learn from it. I'm sure there's other questions that people ask that applied to your situation. That is a great balance that Fueling Dynamic Fundraising has. Did you guys do any breakout groups? And, I guess, Laura, you did talk about you guys pitched to each other. Was there any other breakout sessions that were memorable for you?
No, I remember one. It was sort of fun because there was a picture of it. And again, what's great about it is they feed you, so that's always nice, right? The Carlisle Inn, so that's always fueled, right, for Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. Yeah. But it's also sort of break up the day. So again, very well thought out. But in this particular one, it was dealing sort of with your marketing. So remember, Laura, they took us all out in the hallway and they sort of broke us up in groups, and then they gave us all junk mail. I was like, what's all that?
Tom, it wasn't junk mail. They were direct mail pieces.
Direct promotional mail. Materials. Right, exactly. And we had to break up into groups, right? I'm embarrassing myself. So we had to break up into groups. And then people you didn't really, you've seen them, but you didn't really have an interaction with them. So again, it was structured very nicely that you had some face time with other people, on a particular project. And this was just sort of fun because who doesn't rip open, the promotional materials that come home and sort of look at it and they have to do a quick little evaluation. How does it strike you? Is it too wordy? The use of images. So it was a great exercise. And of course, we all deal with that in fundraising development. So I thought that was a fun, quick, easy, little exercise. And everything got recycled in the end. So that was a good thing. All that promotional material got recycled. So.
Yeah, sustainable practices.
Right.
Yeah.
We had cubes that sort of talked about, and they gave us sort of the first exercise we did was you had to construct a cube, and I almost dipped out because I'm not a civil engineer. Wrong CEUs. But we put together, and it talked about sort of the different sides of fundraising. There we go. I knew you'd be an excellent student.
I'm looking at them individually now, but yes, I still have my.
But it really does help. I'm a very visual learner. And so those sorts of exercises were very helpful. I would like to note that both of the instructors had been, in addition to being faculty at the Lilly School of Philanthropy, which is a fabulous organization. They had been frontline fundraisers. So each of them had lived this life. And interestingly, through their affiliation with the Lilly School, I took a follow-on AI and fundraising class, which was fantastic. And then I took another class that the other instructor taught as an AFP class. So as a CFRE, I'm always looking for great learning opportunities. So they both have very, very distinguished records in fundraising. And so that they could understand when you went, I don't know how to write another letter. They sort of, ginned up the excitement. So they were sort of colleagues, if you will, as well.
And just on that too, I mean, they certainly relayed their experiences. It was wonderful to hear from them. The other thing I thought was, wow, I'm glad they're doing this because we've all been there. They also taught, not extensively, but you're gonna make mistakes, right? You're gonna have failures, and they even gave some of their own, right? I mean, they sort of, just vulnerable in that sense that here they are instructing the class, but they gave some really good examples from back in the day of some of the mistakes that they've made, and so avoid that. And I thought that was also, in addition to here, how do you do it? But, just understand that we're all human here. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to sort of go down, but don't worry about it. Just pick yourself back up, learn from it, and move on. And I thought that was a really good part of the lesson.
I imagine that fear is probably a big part of what keeps people from wanting to fundraise. So having them be able to share their failures and how they move through it, I imagine was extremely valuable. At least for me, that would be my biggest fear is the word fundraising is scary. So by having some professionals share that, it's not you can always move past is probably super helpful. Yeah.
And sorry, one last thing. There were some of the Patterson Foundation consultants were in the room. And so I understand that they're going to sort of lead us through. They don't divorce us, so we're married for life. Now that we've been through Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, we're a family. So to have them in the room, and they, I think there were two other people there that were CFREs. So, we could look to them, and we have reached out to them to ask for advice. So again, it was having people at all levels of fundraising and in the room to have conversations with you. So there was a lot of not necessarily constructed integration or exchange of ideas, but a lot of it was just sort of in the hallway. Was great.
Right. And I want to just add a plug in there for the Patterson Foundation. I mean, you just got me thinking, Laura, about something. There's follow on because we've all been to workshops like here you do it. Thanks for coming. Good luck with things. But the Literacy Council of Sarasota has also been very fortunate to participate almost 10 years now, and it's still going, is with the Patterson Foundation's Margin Emission Ignition initiative with Larry Clark and Michael Oxman. And we were sort of back in the day, the 2016, cohort. And that was a game changer for us. And, I have a business background. I know about business planning, and Margin Emission Ignition is all about earned income, as you know. But, and what I liked about it, and we're still part of a cohort, there's knowledge sharing sessions, there's Thrive and Dine follow-up, there's ongoing, it's sort of like continuing education. That's just with Margin Emission Ignition. Well, now it's the same thing with Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. It's not just like, oh, great, thanks for showing up, here's your book, give us a call or drop us an email if you have a question. The Patterson Foundation really re-engages with the cohort, and you really sort of become alumni. Right. I mean, truly over time. And there's, we're already being signed up. I think it's next week. There's a knowledge sharing session, and they're already occurring. I think there's a Thrive and Dine, in the process. We've been contacted about, hey, here are some selected topics that you can get some consultation, again, at no cost to us. And I know one of them is going to be the case for support. Right, it was probably going to be one of those things that, sort of individualized support. So again, it's not just a matter of the Patterson Foundation providing great information, great opportunities to learn, but it's also to take what you learn and actually be successfully implement it, successfully execute, whatever that might mean for your agency. It's not prescribed, but the Patterson Foundation is right there as your partner and as your catalyst for that needed change with your organization, so you can really thrive and grow and have an even bigger impact in the community.
All right, so as we start to wind down this interview here, another TPFism is sharing a cookie from your jar or a piece of advice. So Laura, what is a piece of advice or a cookie from your jar that you would like to share with somebody walking a similar path? Take
advantage of what the Patterson Foundation has on offer. When I was fundraising in Sarasota, it was a little frustrating that you couldn't apply to the Patterson Foundation to get money. And you always think cash is king when you're a fundraiser. But having been in this long enough, and particularly from a board perspective, I think that capacity building is the greatest gift that a foundation can give. Sorry, not the only gift, but it's a very good gift. And the Patterson Foundation does it with excellence. So I think my advice or my, words of wisdom to a board chair would be encourage your development director, your executive director to take that time to hone his or her skills and to really learn the best practices. I think investing in this education from a staff time perspective and from, again, your own time perspective is very valuable, because you cannot be a good leader in the organization if you don't know the issues that are facing fund development professionals. So take the time, take the risk, take the leap, take over. Agreed.
And Tom, what's a cookie from your jar that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's some of the same ingredients, right? It's very similar to Laura's cookie, and that is if the Patterson Foundation has offerings out there that might be of interest to your organization, by all means, take advantage of them. You'll be developing not just the skill set for your staff, your organization, your board members, but you'll be developing a relationship, not just with the Patterson Foundation, but also with your peers in the communities that will be ongoing over time. And it'll enrich yourselves, professionally, and really benefit your organization, and you'll have truly a bigger impact in the community.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. You guys are a great steward of Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. You went through 40 hours basically of training, 32 hours or something like that. But you still have to go out and do the work. And you guys have already shown that impact can be immediate. And you still have the follow-up meetings that you're going to be participating in. Right. So thank you guys both so much for your time today. And I know the Patterson Foundation really appreciates that you guys are doing such a great job with the work that you have taken and what you've learned from Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Thrivability Podcast by Beyond the Blog. For more information, please visit thepattersonfoundation.org/beyondtheblog.